Why should the person who's going to a football stadium or the person who's going to the theatre, why should they have to declare whether or not they have been vaccinated?
Out of courtesy to the people around them, but out of responsibility to the people around them, James. And we hear a great deal about rights, I've noticed, and very little about responsibilities. Well, what about all the people who have the right not to want to share their company with somebody who hasn't been vaccinated, whether that's in the workplace, whether that's in the play place? Why should they not have the right to know? Why should they not have the right to know that the people they're mixing with have been vaccinated?
But why does it make a difference to you as an individual? If you've been vaccinated, why does it make it a matter about being courteous to others, whether somebody else is vaccinated or not? Because you've taken the vaccine not only to reduce, and I know it doesn't extinguish, but to reduce the chance that you will receive COVID, but also to reduce the chance that you will transmit it. Of course, I would like to see people persuaded that the vaccine is a good idea. But what difference does it make to you if another individual has or has not had the vaccine?
Well, it may make the difference between life and death. We don't allow people to drink and drive. Now, is there a human right that says, I've got to be allowed to drink and drive? No, of course not. Why not? Because you might kill people. Well, I'm sorry, you might actually be responsible for the cause of killing somebody if you spread a disease that for certain people can be lethal.
But hang on a second, you're making the assumption there that by having both doses of the vaccine, that you have reduced, if not extinguished, the chance that you too could be a carrier. You can carry COVID-19 when you have been vaccinated.
Absolutely, you can, but the chances are very greatly lessened. Yeah, I know people who've been vaccinated who've then gone on to catch COVID. Of course, that is the case. But the chances are infinitely less in those that have been vaccinated than those who haven't. Now, look, the individual has an absolute right not to be vaccinated. You said at the start in your introduction, I respect that right. Yeah, I respect that right too. They have the right not to be vaccinated. But if you want to go to a football match, you have to buy a ticket, don't you? If you haven't got a ticket, you can't go into the football match. If you can't afford the ticket, you can't go into the football match. Is that a right? Do you have a right to go into a football match when you haven't got a ticket? The vaccine passport is a ticket. It's a right of entry. And I think the people who are running those establishments have the right to determine whether or not they want, in the interests of the majority of their clientele, to say, we're not having people in here who haven't been vaccinated. It's my choice. If I choose not to be vaccinated, that's entirely my business. But it doesn't give me the right to go and mix with people who care and who have been vaccinated, does it?
Well, I hear your point, but what about this? So Boris Johnson has been accused by cabinet ministers of denying people their fundamental freedoms over plans for vaccine passports. The government have not been terribly clear on why vaccine passports should or should not be allowed, and there is a huge amount of consternation about their introduction. Wouldn't it be better for the government to persuade people that getting vaccinated is the right thing to do, rather than forcing them in this somewhat subversive way?
You're not forcing them to have a vaccination.
Nobody's telling you if you're allowing employers to say you cannot keep your job unless you get jabbed, if you're allowing football clubs to say you're not allowed in unless you've been vaccinated, then you are forcing people.
Your argument is deeply flawed. I'm sorry, James. Because what you're saying is there is a right for people to spread disease. There is a right for people not to care about those around them, but there is not a right for the majority who are vaccinated, who want to be vaccinated, to have the protection. If I'm an employer and the majority of my workforce have been vaccinated and want to know that they are secure in their place of employment, very often working close together, then I think they have that right. It's my choice if I choose not to be vaccinated. I accept that entirely. But it's not my choice to inflict that choice upon other people. And that is what you're suggesting should be the case.
Well, no, I'm suggesting that people need to be convinced by the government that this is the right thing to do, rather than being forced by the government that this is the right thing to do.
Well, nobody is holding a gun to
If you take the tack that people must have vaccine passports in order to do certain things, you are coercing them and forcing them by stealth into having vaccine passports. I don't think that's acceptable.
So you're saying you have a God-given right to go to a football match?
I don't have a God-given right to go to a football match, and I would hope that the arguments are there to persuade people why it is a good thing for them to be vaccinated in order to go. I just don't think you should be forcing people to do that.
You're not forcing people to do it. Nobody is holding a gun to your head.
You're allowing people and companies to say and encouraging them not to do it in the same way that you're saying, we're not forcing them, but by the way, if you want to work in the health service, if you want to do this, if you want to do that, you're going to have to be vaccinated. Rather than, where are the strong arguments? Where are the strong arguments from the government and the evidence?
You're not seriously suggesting, are you, that people in the health service shouldn't be vaccinated?
I would like to see them vaccinated, but I don't think you should be forcing people. What if somebody who's been working in the health service for 30 years and for a medical reason they cannot have the vaccine? What do you do then?
Same argument as you'd say with a surgeon. You can't operate if you're not vaccinated against hepatitis B.
So you'll throw them out?
You might have to. You might have to transfer the discipline, move them to somewhere else. I don't have a problem.
What about 3 million young people here on the front? Okay, on the front page of the iNewspaper, 3 million young people were warned that they must get their first vaccination within days or face restrictions on what they can do later in the year. What about the younger people for whom there is more risk from them having the vaccine than there is from catching COVID?
That is absolutely not the case. I'm sorry, that isn't the case. And there is a serious danger for young people in long COVID. And you and I have a responsibility and a duty, I think, to encourage as many young people as possible to get vaccinated. And if at the end of the day, that means a curtailment of something that you clearly describe as a liberty and a right, which I don't believe is a liberty or a right any more than I believe that somebody has a right to drive a car drunk, then I'm sorry, I just don't agree with you. The only caveat I have, and it is the only caveat that I have about this, is that it shouldn't be a backdoor entry to an identity card. If we want to have an identity
card, that's exactly what it is.
Well, no, it isn't. No, it is not. No, it's not. It doesn't. Identify.
You say that, I'm not convinced, and it's your job to convince me and others that it's not. So maybe the government has got a PR job to do.
My job is not to convince you. My job is to convince your listeners. One, that it is a very good thing to go and get vaccinated, and two, that they have a responsibility, and most of them do recognize that they have a responsibility to their fellow men and women.
I agree with both those points. I disagree with the method by which the government is getting there. So, for example, if the government, was doing a better job with the PR on communications when you were trying to explain to people why we must do this, the data that has been put out over the last few weeks is abominable. The messaging is shambolic. And the last point I would make is, why is, for example, France, which is many people's top destination for holidays and visits, why on earth is that on the Amber Plus list when there is no evidence other than one outpost island as to why they should be there? This is politics. This is not common sense. If you undermine your strategy by making stupid and daft decisions, how can you take the public with you?
James, you've just lost one argument and you're now trying to switch it to another one. On this front, I happen to agree with you. I think it was a cretinous decision. I think it was a decision taken in haste. I think that probably the new health secretary found himself bounced into it and then tried to bounce his cabinet colleagues into it. But I think it was a thoroughly bad and unnecessary decision. That is a separate argument.
It certainly is. Whether or not I have lost the first argument, I'm glad we're in agreement on the second one. Let's hope the government can sort out their shambolic mess, and maybe they can sort out the communications. And maybe on one point we can agree, and then we can all move on, Sir Roger, which is the most important thing that the government has to do at this stage is to put out the data and to give people information. I genuinely want to see more people vaccinated, and I genuinely want to see younger people as well take the vaccine as quickly and as speedily as those who are older in the population have done. And I would also reinforce that I think those who have put together the vaccination program have done a fantastic job. But I want people to be convinced, not coerced. Would you agree with that as a strategy?
I would prefer people to be convinced, but I have to accept as a politician that there is a group of people who are anti-vax, And not just for this, by the way, but for anything at all. The same people that don't want measles vaccines, for example, or the same kind of people that don't want those, and that we're not going to persuade them. And you can go from hell to breakfast and you still won't persuade those people. Now, they have a right, come back to where I started, they have a right not to be vaccinated. They don't have a right to then impose their non-vaccination and the effects of it upon anybody else.